PC players have the advantage, but changing these 17 settings will level the playing field. Navigate to your settings and find the graphics tab, and from there, you're going to want to turn on-demand texture streaming off. On-demand texture streaming is downloading high-quality textures to your console while you are gaming, which can cause lag. This will degrade the visual quality of the game, but it's not a noticeable amount. Directly under on-demand texture streaming is world motion blur and weapon motion blur, and you want to turn both of these off. Motion blur does exactly what it says it does. It adds motion blur to the game to make it feel more cinematic at the cost of visibility. You're going to have a hard time seeing enemy players with these turned on. The comparison images in game show this off perfectly. As you can see with motion blur on, it's very blurry, and it's going to be hard to see people like that, whereas it's very clear when it's turned off. And if we look at weapon motion blur, it's the same thing except for it's adding that blur to your weapon, so just turn these off, please. Directly under the motion blur settings, we have film grain, which we want to turn all the way down. Otherwise, the game is applying a film grain effect to the whole screen, which again will hurt visibility. Under film grain, we have depth of field, which is another setting that will affect visibility, and we want to turn it off. Depth of field adds blur to anything that's out of focus, which is going to make it harder to spot enemy players. Underneath depth of field, we have Fidelity FX Cast. Turn this on. Fidelity FX Cast is adding sharpness to your game, which is going to make it much easier to spot enemies, especially at longer ranges. And underneath that, you can adjust the strength of the sharpness. So I personally put it at 100 to make it as sharp as possible. But if you find that putting this at 100 is too sharp for your TV or your monitor, then try adjusting it accordingly until you find a setting that works for you. And under the Fidelity Cast strength, you're going to see the 120 Hz refresh rate option. It'll be right here under the view tab directly above field of view. Make sure if you do have a high refresh rate monitor that this is checked on. I am not currently seeing this option because I only have 60 Hz available to me since I'm recording this through an old Elgato. That setting is very, very important as it's going to make your game feel very smooth, and that is one of the settings that gets you on par with PC players. If you're on the new Xbox or have a PS5, I highly recommend you get a high refresh rate monitor so you can take advantage of this setting. It's an absolute game changer. But a little bit further down the view tab, you're going to see first person and third person camera movement. You want to put these all the way down to least so your screen is not shaking all over the place. This affects visibility. It's going to make it harder to see players, and it's a bit nauseating to look at. And then at the very bottom of the graphics tab, we have safe area. So click on it and your safe area is probably going to look like this. What you want to do is drag the sides and the top all the way as low as they go, and it should end up looking something like this. What this is doing is it's squeezing your HUD towards the center of your screen. So important information like your mini map or your teammates, for example, are all going to be closer to the center of your screen, and it's going to be a lot easier and quicker to see that important information. Almost every single pro player I've watched does this. They know how important it is to have all that important information right in your peripheral view. Navigate over to the audio tab, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have been wondering what the best audio mix is, and it is home theater. If this does ever change, I will update you guys in a video, so make sure you guys subscribe for that to stay up to date with all the latest settings. But the other important audio setting is all the way at the bottom here, and it's called reduced tinnitus sound. Now, if you've ever been flashbanged or stunned before, you know that super high-pitched ringing sound you get, and it's very, very annoying and distracting. By turning this on, it'll actually get rid of that sound effect, and your ears will thank you. Next thing you want to do is find your interface tab. So once you're in there, you're going to see color customization here underneath readability, and underneath color customization, you want to change your color filter to filter 2, your color filter target to both, and then the world color intensity and interface color intensity both all the way up to 100. This is going to make your game look a little more vibrant, which will make it a little easier to see players in game. Now, PC players can make their game look a lot more vibrant and saturated than you, but this will at least get you somewhat close. And then scrolling down here to neutral, you want to change this to any color that looks very visible to you. And what this is going to do is change the color of your pings in game, because by default they're white and it's kind of hard to see. So if I change it to something like pink, like how I do here, it's just going to make my pings and my teammates' pings a lot easier to see in the game. Once you're done with that, we're going to to back out of color customization and scroll all the way to the bottom of the interface tab, and you are going to see center dot here. So turn this on, and then I recommend setting center dot scale to larger, but you could change it to largest or default depending on your preference. But what this is doing is adding a dot to the center of your screen, and this makes it a lot easier to work on your centering and just makes your centering better in general, and it's something I recommend everyone turn on. Now let's get into some important controller settings you might not have heard of. So find the controller tab, and underneath that you're going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and you're going to see interact/reload behavior. Now you want to change this to prioritize interact. What this allows you to do is just tap your interact button in order to loot, so you can loot a lot quicker. And if there's nothing to loot in the area, you can just tap your interact button to reload. Now if there is something to loot in the area and you want to reload, you instead just hold your interact button instead, and that way you reload. This just makes looting significantly faster, and everyone should be using this setting. And then underneath it we have armor plate behavior. Now you want to set this to apply all, and what this will do is it makes it so you just have to press your armor plate button once and all your armor plates will be applied, which will make it a lot quicker. Now I understand there will be certain situations where you don't want to apply all your armor plates because someone might be shooting at you and you need to shoot back. And in that case, if you were stuck in an animation where you're applying all your armor plates and there's nothing you can do about it, that would suck. But there's a workaround. So all you have to do is YY, which is just double tapping your switch weapon button twice, and that will cancel the animation. Let's move over to the advanced controller settings here, and we're going to scroll down past all of this here, and we're going to find aim response curve type, and you want to switch this to dynamic. If you've heard of rotational aim assist before, this is the setting you need to change in order to help activate it. Now obviously in game you need to be strafing in order to activate it as well, but you also need this setting changed. If you're not sure what rotational aim assist is, I have covered it in other videos. I'll have it pop up somewhere here on screen if you want to learn about it. It's a super broken mechanic, and if you play controller, you need to learn how to do it. From there, we're going to be scrolling down to inputs dead zone and click show more on that, and you're going to get a bunch of options here which may seem a bit overwhelming at first. So go into a custom game, or if you don't have MW2 installed, just load up a game of Warzone and change this right stick minimum all the way down to 0. And what you're going to notice is that in game you're going to have a little bit of stick drift, which obviously we don't want because that's going to affect your aim. So what you're going to want to do is come back into your settings and put this up to 0.01. Go back into your game. If you have stick drift, then come back, up it by 0.01 again, and keep repeating this process until you get to a number where you're not getting stick drift. And the reason you're doing this is because you want to keep this number as low as possible, because when you're keeping this number super low, it's reducing basically the amount of lag you're getting on your joystick, which will make your joystick feel much more responsive and just better to aim with in general. So for me, the sweet spot on my controller is 0.05, and I know a lot of people for the left stick minimum, they like to put this all the way down because on your left stick, it's your movement stick. It doesn't really matter if you have stick drift on that, but I just kind of like to match these up. And then the L2 and R2 button dead zone here, you want to turn these all the way down to 0.01. So when you press your L2 button to ADS, it's going to be basically instant. It's going to feel so much more snappy and responsive. And then same with the R2 button dead zone or right trigger on Xbox. When you go to shoot, as soon as you touch that button, you're going to start shooting. It's just going to feel so much more snappy and responsive. But scrolling down here a bit under movement behaviors, you are going to see invert, slide, and dive behavior, and you want to change this to inverted. By default, you just tap the button in order to slide, and you hold the button in order to dolphin dive. And by putting this on inverted, it does literally the opposite. You just tap the dolphin dive. And the reason you want to do this is because there's really no reason to slide in this game. In most situations, it's just going to get you killed. But there's a lot of useful situations for dolphin diving, and this makes it much easier to do by just tapping the button instead of holding it. And two settings below that, you have parachute auto deploy. Now I recommend everyone turns this off, because if you have parachute auto deploy on, it obviously automatically deploys your parachute. But the problem with that is it deploys your parachute at a much higher height than you would actually be able to pull it if you have this turned off. So if it doesn't automatically pull it, you can pull your parachute much lower to the ground, and it can help you get the jump on a lot of opponents. The only downside to this is you have to be really careful. You don't want to end up breaking your ankles and taking fall damage. And then the last controller setting I want to go over is backpack alternate control. Now, this setting is kind of preference, and what it does is if you turn it on, it allows you to use your left analog stick here in order to navigate through backpacks instead of having to use your D-pad here. So this is kind of personal preference. I know a lot of people like turning this on. I personally like using my D-pad to navigate through backpacks, but there is that option for you.